Dr. Naomi Carter was not just any passenger aboard Liberty Air Flight 1382. She was 7 months pregnant with twins, a renowned black neurosurgeon, and on her way to present groundbreaking research that could save countless lives. All she asked for was a pillow, something small to ease the pain in her lower back. What she received instead was a slap across the face, and a brutal reminder of how deep discrimination still runs in the systems we trust. How does a medical pioneer, celebrated in lecture halls and surgical theaters, become the target of physical violence in a first-class cabin? Why did passengers around her stay silent or worse, take sides against her? And what would you do if the person being assaulted for simply requesting comfort looked like your sister, your colleague, or you? What began as a single moment of shocking injustice escalated into a national controversy involving government hearings, corporate corruption, legal intimidation, and a system designed not to protect the victim but to silence her. Behind closed doors, powerful executives moved swiftly to erase the incident, discredit Dr. Carter, and protect their own. But Naomi refused to disappear. She stood her ground not only for herself, but for her unborn daughters and every passenger who's ever been told they don't belong. How far would a billion-dollar airline go to crush one woman's voice? And how do you keep fighting when the cost is your career, your health, and even your family's safety? This is more than a story about racism on a plane. It's about the ripple effects of courage. It's about the cost of telling the truth when powerful people want it buried. And it's about the quiet strength of a woman who said, "No more." If you've ever questioned whether one voice can still matter in a world where power seems untouchable, this story is for you. Before we begin, tap that like button to support stories that speak truth. Share this with someone who believes in justice, and hit subscribe so you don't miss what happens next. Because this story changes everything. Now let's begin. Dr. Naomi Carter felt the sting before she registered the impact. Her cheek burned hot where the flight attendant's palm had struck her face, and the entire first-class cabin seemed to freeze. Conversation ceased. Champagne glasses trembled slightly on polished tray tables. Faces turned, mouths ajar in shared disbelief. One moment, she had politely requested a pillow to ease the strain in her lower back. At 7 months pregnant with twins, every hour of immobility was agony. The next, she was the recipient of an open-handed slap delivered with a venom so sharp it cracked like thunder in the plush silence of first class. Standing above her was Heather Whitmore, a blonde flight attendant whose professional smile had long since vanished. Now, she glared down at Naomi. Her frosty blue eyes hardened with an almost chilling disgust. "You people never know your place," she spat. Naomi's hand trembled as she reached for her phone. One call, just one, could change everything. The plane hadn't even left the gate at JFK International Airport, and already the damage had been done. What would you have done if you'd seen a pregnant woman slapped for simply asking for a pillow? Dr. Naomi Carter had been preparing for this trip for months. As one of the few black female neurosurgeons in the country, she had worked tirelessly on a pioneering study about how pregnancy influences neuroplasticity. Her work promised to change how maternal care was approached worldwide. The Global Maternal Health Summit in Seattle was to be her culmination, a chance to present her findings. 3 years in the making. Her husband, Elijah Brooks, had insisted she fly first class. "You deserve it, Naomi, especially with the babies coming," he'd said, his warm palm resting on her belly as he confirmed the tickets himself. Naomi had reluctantly agreed, despite her usual modesty. Comfort, this time, felt earned. She had boarded with care, stowing away her carry-on, which held meticulously prepared presentation materials. She rehearsed her key points silently as other passengers filed in. But when Heather Whitmore entered the cabin, Naomi sensed the temperature shift. The woman's expression stiffened the moment their eyes met. During pre-flight service, Heather's smile flowed freely for white passengers, offering flutes of champagne, hanging coats, delivering headsets with efficiency. But when she reached Naomi, her demeanor soured. 3 times, Naomi had requested water to take her prenatal vitamins. Each time, Heather either ignored her or curtly replied, "I'll get to you when I can." Eventually, after 20 minutes, Heather returned, but as she handed Naomi the cup, it accidentally tipped. Ice-cold water splashed over Naomi's lap and drenched her printed slides. "Oh, oops," Heather said flatly. "You should really keep those in a safer place." Naomi tried to remain composed, drying off her soaked materials with tissues from her bag, her heart thudding painfully in her chest. Her back ached sharply, worse now from the stress. She buzzed for assistance once more. "Excuse me," she said as Heather passed. "Could I please have a pillow? I'm 7 months pregnant with twins." "My lower back," Heather whipped around. "Everyone has special needs." She snapped. "You people always expect special treatment." The cabin fell into a loaded silence. A white man 3 rows ahead had just been given 2 pillows without even asking. "I'm requesting a basic medical accommodation," Naomi said, her voice steady despite the burn of humiliation. "Nothing more." Then the slap came, sudden, brutal. Heather's palm struck Naomi's cheek with such force her head snapped sideways. "You people never know your place," she repeated, loud enough for several passengers to hear. Phones came out, cameras clicked. Some passengers gasped in protest. Others sat frozen. A few even murmured in Heather's defense. "She must have done something," one woman whispered. Naomi's fingers hovered over her screen. Her hand shook, but her resolve didn't. She called Angela Monroe, a friend from law school, now a senior legal advisor at the Federal Aviation Board. "Angela, it's Naomi. I was just slapped across the face by a flight attendant on Liberty Air Flight 227, still grounded at JFK. I'm 7 months pregnant. Yes, people are recording." Angela's voice was clipped and urgent. "Stay on board. I'll make the call." Minutes later, the cabin lights flickered. "Ladies and gentlemen," the captain's voice said over the intercom, "we've been instructed to delay departure pending an onboard incident. Please remain in your seats." Heather's expression drained of color. She glanced toward Naomi, her lip twitching, her eyes narrowing. This passenger had connections, but instead of backing down, Heather squared her shoulders, turning to her colleagues with rapid, whispered urgency. She gestured animatedly toward Naomi, as if briefing them on a threat. Passengers watched as whispers spread. "She attacked me," Heather claimed when Stephen Langford, Liberty Air's customer service director, arrived. "She grabbed my wrist when I told her we were out of pillows." I defended myself. "That's a lie," Naomi said, stunned. Several passengers had recorded the moment, but not all were willing to share. I saw her acting out. A woman in designer sunglasses said she was very intense. How exactly was she aggressive? A young black man across the aisle asked, holding up his still-recording phone. By asking for a pillow, 2 uniformed Liberty Air representatives boarded. Their expressions were unreadable. They pulled Heather aside for questioning, but kept looking at Naomi as if she were the inconvenience. One of them approached her with a cool, rehearsed smile. "Dr. Carter, perhaps we could rebook you on a flight tomorrow." Given the situation, "I'm presenting at an international medical conference tomorrow morning," Naomi replied. and I have been assaulted on your aircraft." The atmosphere has become tense for other passengers. The representative added carefully, "So has being slapped in the face while pregnant." Naomi responded. Police officers arrived next, clearly annoyed. "Let's not escalate." One said to Naomi, "Flying is stressful. Maybe just let it go this time." Naomi clenched her jaw. "I have witnesses. I have video. And I know my rights." Then came Stephen Langford, distinguished, silver-haired, expensively suited. He went straight to Heather. "I understand there was a disruptive passenger," he said loudly. "I am Dr. Naomi Carter," Naomi said, standing as best she could with her swollen belly. "I requested a pillow. I was slapped in the face, and now I'm being treated like the problem." Stephen Langford's eyes narrowed slightly at the mention of federal transportation rights, but before he could respond, a woman stepped into the cabin wearing a Federal Aviation Board badge. "I'm Rachel Lynn," she said calmly, "Passenger Rights Division. We've received a report of physical assault on board this aircraft. We'll need to investigate immediately." Rachel Lynn, a poised investigator from the Federal Aviation Board, stepped into the cabin, flashing her badge. "I'm Rachel Lynn, Passenger Rights Division," she announced clearly. "We've received a serious report of physical assault aboard this aircraft." The cabin, tense already, felt as if someone had opened a sealed door and let judgment sweep through. Stephen Langford, Liberty Air's customer service director, immediately adjusted his tone. "We're conducting a thorough internal review," he said with syrupy professionalism. "There seems to be some misunderstanding." Rachel Lynn's eyes narrowed. "Misunderstandings don't leave visible marks on passengers' faces," she replied, motioning toward the angry red welt on Dr. Naomi Carter's cheek. Naomi said nothing, but her gaze didn't waver. Rachel asked to review video footage and speak to nearby passengers. It only took minutes. The facts were clear. Witnesses contradicted Heather's version. The assault had been unprovoked. Soon after, Heather Whitmore was quietly removed from the aircraft. As she passed Naomi, she hissed under her breath, "This isn't over." Stephen Langford stood in the aisle, his expression carefully constructed. "We apologize for the delay," he told passengers. "Ms. Whitmore will be replaced, and we will conduct a full investigation into this unfortunate incident." The plane finally took off 2 hours late, but the atmosphere had shifted entirely. No one sat beside Naomi. Flight attendants brought her water and a blanket, but avoided eye contact. Other passengers whispered or stared as she walked to the restroom, her balance unsteady with the twins pressing low in her belly. What should have been a relaxing flight became a test of endurance. Was Naomi right to stay on board and stand her ground? Or should she have taken another flight, as suggested, to avoid the confrontation as soon as the wheels touched down in Seattle? Naomi's phone erupted. Her name was everywhere. Dr. Naomi C. Versa. Heather Whitmore was trending across every platform. She scrolled through the headlines while the plane taxied. Pregnant neurosurgeon slapped and first class caught on camera shocking. Racial incident aboard Liberty Air flight attendant. Claims self-defense against entitled passenger. Some media outlets told the truth. Others twisted it beyond recognition. A growing wave of online debates split into polarized camps. Hashtags surged. Justice for Naomi. Stand with Heather. As Naomi stepped off the plane, she froze. The airport terminal teemed with protesters and reporters. Signs waved, "Pregnancy deserves respect. Racism has no altitude." But also, "Stop playing the victim. Cancel culture kills careers." Security hustled her through the crowd. Dr. Carter, do you regret how you handled the situation? Do you think you've destroyed a woman's livelihood over a misunderstanding? Are you filing charges? The shouting didn't stop until the hotel doors closed behind her. But even there, peace eluded her. In the lobby of the Summit Hotel Seattle, whispers followed her. Fellow conference attendees glanced up from behind phones. Some nodded in quiet support. Others turned away. At her room, Dr. Gregory Thomas, the conference coordinator, waited uncomfortably. "Naomi," he began, this has placed the conference in a delicate position." "I've placed it?" she asked, incredulous. He avoided her eyes. "Several sponsors are concerned the story may overshadow the scientific work. There's talk of postponing your session until next year." Naomi stood straighter, her hand instinctively resting on her belly. "My research isn't about me," she said. "It's about helping women like me, like the ones we claim to care about." Postponing would be allowing discrimination twice in one weekend. "Dr. Thomas sighed. "Your slot remains at 9A. But I hope you understand the situation. Alone again." Naomi sat on the edge of the hotel bed. Her presentation folder lay open. It now contained more than slides and graphs. A crumpled piece of paper fell from between the pages. In jagged letters, it read, "Go home. Nen-o." "Doctor." Security was called, a report was filed. Hotel management moved her to a more secure floor, but no lock could protect her from what came next. That night, Heather Whitmore appeared on Frontline America, weeping through carefully applied mascara. I felt threatened. She sobbed. She was agitated. I didn't want to hurt her. I just reacted. The host nodded with manufactured empathy. "In today's cancel culture," he mused, "isn't it dangerous for hardworking Americans to be demonized so quickly?" The comments section was flooded with support for Heather. Naomi stopped reading when the slurs began. Sleep was impossible. Morning came too soon. Naomi entered the conference room with her head held high, but the energy was tense. Seats that should have been filled with peers were conspicuously empty. When Dr. Gregory Thomas introduced her, it was with minimal enthusiasm. Then she stepped to the podium. "Good morning," she said. "I'm Dr. Naomi Carter, and I'll be presenting on optimizing neuroplasticity in high-risk pregnancies." A pause, and yes, I'm the woman from the video. Silence. I was slapped for asking for a pillow, but I am not here to talk about that. I'm here to talk about science that could save lives. And with that, she began. Slide after slide, data point after data point, Naomi delivered her work with impeccable precision. Her voice never trembled. Her message never wavered. When she finished, the applause was cautious, but it grew. Slowly, then louder. Not everyone clapped, but enough did. Backstage, her phone buzzed. An email from Liberty Air. "We apologize for your experience. After review, we have determined this was an isolated incident. We are offering compensation of $5,000 in the interest of resolving this matter amicably. We respectfully request your discretion moving forward." That same evening, Heather reappeared on another news show, claiming Naomi had ruined her life. Back at the hotel, Naomi found another note, this one slid under her door. "We know where you sleep. Race baiter." Security took it seriously. She was moved again, but her nerves didn't settle. The twins shifted restlessly. Her heart rate spiked. Then came the text. "Dr. Carter, I worked with Heather. What happened to you wasn't isolated. Please call me. Others are too afraid to speak up." 3 days later, back home, Naomi sat in Dr. Laura Kim's office. The monitor showed the babies, kicking inside her, but her blood pressure was dangerously high. "You need to slow down immediately, Doctor," Kim warned. "This level of stress can trigger early labor or worse. I'm prescribing reduced work hours and bed rest if things don't improve." Naomi nodded numbly, but the gears in her mind kept turning. This wasn't just about a slap or a flight. Her hospital administrator had asked her to step away for a bit to avoid more controversy. Colleagues now avoided her in the hall. The cost of asking for a pillow had spiraled into the unraveling of everything she had worked for. Then, as if on cue, her phone rang. It was Angela Monroe from the Federal Aviation Board. "Naomi," she said, "I've been reviewing the investigation, and something doesn't sit right." "What do you mean?" "There's pushback. Normal protocols aren't being followed. Delays, deflections, redirects." Naomi felt a chill creep through her spine. Angela continued, "I did some digging, and I think I know why. Heather Whitmore. She's related to Jonathan Reed." Naomi blinked. The name sounds familiar. He's the chief operating officer of Liberty Air. Heather's his niece. Everything clicked. The nonchalant police, the weak apology, the hostile online spin. They weren't protecting just an employee. They were protecting power. The call from Angela Monroe came late in the evening, her voice low and urgent. "Naomi, I've been digging into Liberty Air's internal process. Something's off. Really off." Naomi sat on the edge of her couch, one hand absently massaging the curve of her swollen belly. "What do you mean standard investigation protocols aren't being followed?" Angela explained. "Key procedures are being bypassed, and every time I ask for updates, I'm redirected." Naomi's stomach tightened, not from the babies this time. "Someone's interfering?" she asked. "Yes, and I finally figured out who—" Angela paused, then dropped the hammer. "Heather Whitmore is Jonathan Reed's niece. Jonathan Reed, as in the COO of Liberty Air. Exactly. Her mother is his sister. That's why the response has been so tepid. Why Heather never showed fear. She knew the system was rigged in her favor. Everything Naomi had endured, the downplayed incident, the weak apology, the character smears clicked into place. The next morning, an overnight package arrived at her doorstep. Inside were formal settlement documents, a $50,000 offer, a non-disclosure agreement, in exchange for the money. Naomi Carter would agree never to speak about the incident again. She'd delete her social media posts and publicly state the matter had been mutually resolved to her satisfaction. Elijah Brooks flipped through the papers, fury burning in his eyes. "They think you'll take this because you're pregnant," he muttered. Beside him, Andre Silva, their longtime friend and a respected civil rights attorney, sat shaking his head. "They're trying to buy your silence," Andre said. "They hope you'll want peace more than justice, now that the twins are almost here." Naomi's phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Messages from reporters, hate-filled comments, love and support from strangers, and the most painful of all, professional colleagues subtly distancing themselves. "I'm sorry, Naomi," her department head had said with visible discomfort. "The Peterson family has requested that you not be involved in their son's upcoming surgery. They don't want controversy tied to his care." That one stung more than anything the media had thrown at her. Surgeons who used to ask for her insight now avoided eye contact. Conference invitations evaporated. Panels were canceled due to scheduling conflicts. The message was unmistakable. Fighting racism had made her radioactive. The stress took its toll. Her ankles swelled beyond recognition. Braxton Hicks' contractions kept her awake at night. Even rest no longer offered refuge. Then a message arrived that changed everything. I worked with Heather Whitmore for 5 years. What happened to you wasn't isolated. I'm ready to talk. M. Later that week, Naomi met Michelle Sanders in a quiet suburban cafe. The woman looked over her shoulder constantly, her nerves evident. She has a nickname, Michelle said quietly. Among minority crew, they call her the classifier. She sizes people up by race and class, then decides how well she'll treat them. Has anyone ever reported her? Naomi asked. Michelle nodded. At least 7 formal complaints in the last 3 years. Black, Latino, Middle Eastern passengers, all buried, no follow-up, no discipline, because of her uncle. Naomi guessed. Michelle nodded grimly. But there's more. Liberty Air has an internal risk matrix. They rank complaints based on how much of a PR threat the passenger is, how many followers they have, who they're connected to, what kind of job they do. Naomi blinked in disbelief. They're literally deciding whose complaints to take seriously based on how loud they think that person can shout. Yes, Michelle confirmed. You triggered their highest tier, doctor, federal connections. That's the only reason your story wasn't buried like the rest. She handed over a flash drive. Redacted internal emails, scoring matrices, complaint logs. It was a blueprint of systemic discrimination. That evening, Naomi and Elijah sat side by side on the couch, the twins kicking beneath a blanket as they read through the files. The evidence was damning. Then the phone rang. Dr. Carter, the voice said smoothly. This is Jonathan Reed from Liberty Air. Naomi recognized the name immediately. The man behind the curtain. I just wanted to personally reach out. He continued, we value you as a customer and a medical professional. I'm sure you understand that sometimes unfortunate things happen. Naomi leaned back. Interesting timing. Mr. Reed, I was just reviewing some deeply troubling documents about your airline's complaint handling system. There was a pause. I'm not familiar with what you mean, Reed said, but I'd suggest we settle this matter privately. The offer is quite generous. Naomi's voice dropped a degree. This isn't about money. His tone turned sharper. Dr. Carter, you're a brilliant physician, a pregnant woman. Why invite unnecessary stress? Think of your practice, your unborn children. Sometimes it's better to move on. The threat was elegant in its subtlety. I need to consider what's best for my family, she replied carefully. I think that's wise, he said, audibly relieved. Have your lawyer contact our team. When she hung up, Elijah turned to her. He thinks you're going to fold. Naomi took his hand and placed it over the rhythmic thump of a tiny kick. Our children will grow up in a world that sees their skin before their soul. If I stay silent now, what does that teach them? That night, she formally declined the settlement, and she filed a broader discrimination complaint with the Federal Aviation Board, the National Aviation Authority, and the Federal Workplace Equity Commission. The next morning, the retaliation began. Her hospital received an anonymous call questioning her credentials. 3 of her surgeries were canceled by patient request. A certified letter from Winslow & Hale LLP, Liberty Air's legal team, arrived that afternoon. It dismissed her claims outright. Heather Whitmore was described as a model employee with a spotless 15-year record. The incident, it said, was a misunderstanding, exacerbated by the complainant's heightened emotional state due to pregnancy. Naomi stared at the words, heightened emotional state. They were weaponizing her body against her. She handed the letter to Andre Silva, who had agreed to serve as her lead counsel. They're going to use everything, he said after skimming it. They'll demand your medical records, your job history, even your residency evaluations. They're fishing for flaws. They won't find any, Naomi replied. I've spent my whole career preparing for this scrutiny. Elijah, sitting nearby, offered a warning. They don't need truth. They just need something they can spin. A single, out-of-context comment. A shaky moment. That's all it takes. The next week, Strat Secure Solutions, a corporate crisis firm, entered the scene. Suddenly, social media swelled with planted narratives. Why is Dr. Carter targeting Liberty Air? What's her real agenda? Sounds like she's milking the moment for sympathy. Reporters began reaching out. Dr. Carter, can you comment on the rumor you misdiagnosed a patient during residency? Naomi blinked. What they were referencing a case where she had actually corrected a dangerous mistake by her attending physician saving a life. But that truth didn't matter now. The war had begun. The truth was ugly, and Dr. Naomi Carter knew it better than anyone. The media had twisted her history, taking an incident from her residency where she had saved a patient's life by challenging a wrong diagnosis and recasting it as recklessness. She had acted with integrity. And now, that integrity was a weapon being turned against her. Liberty Air's legal team scheduled her deposition for a grueling 8-hour session. Despite her high-risk pregnancy, they rejected all medical appeals to shorten it. When Andre Silva objected on health grounds, their response was insidious. She appears to be using her pregnancy to avoid scrutiny. At home, the weight on her shoulders only grew heavier. Elijah Brooks, usually her rock, had become distant. He worked late, took calls behind closed doors. When Naomi finally asked him what was going on, he hesitated, then confessed. JKL Pharmaceuticals is ending our firm's marketing contract. Quietly. My director told me the truth off the record. Jonathan Reed called their board. Liberty handles their shipping. Millions in contracts. Naomi sat still, stunned. They're targeting you because of me, she whispered. Elijah tried to remain strong. We'll manage. We have savings. This case still matters. But 2 days later, Elijah came home looking hollow. They've done it, he said. 20% of the department laid off, including me. He paused. None of us worked on Liberty or any of its subsidiaries. The message was clear. Naomi lay awake that night, her mind racing through numbers: mortgage payments, health insurance, child care, medical bills. Her phone rang. It was her mother's neighbor from Atlanta. Naomi, baby, your mama collapsed in the garden. Paramedics just left for Heritage Regional Medical Center. They think it was her heart. The overnight flight to Atlanta felt like a surreal loop, another painful echo of the journey that had started it all. Every flight attendant's glance made Naomi wonder if she'd been recognized. Her mother, a retired school principal who had raised her alone, was now lying in cardiac intensive care. Tubes running from her arms, machines tracking every breath. When she finally woke, her voice was hoarse. It's the stress, she whispered. All those awful people calling the house. I told them you've never backed down. Not since you were little. Naomi felt her throat tighten. Her mother had been protecting her, screening hate calls, holding strong, until she couldn't anymore. That night, in the small hospital chapel, Naomi sat alone, surrounded by the sterile hush of empty pews and flickering candles. Her career was under siege. Her husband was jobless. Her mother was fighting for her life. Her unborn twins kicked against the walls of a body cracking under pressure, all because she had stood up against a slap. Maybe settling would have protected them. Maybe silence would have been safer. Her phone buzzed. A message from Elijah. Don't you dare give up. That's exactly what they want. Your mother raised a fighter. Our girls need to know you never back down. Naomi wiped her tears and straightened her back. The next morning, from the hallway outside her mother's hospital room, she called Andre Silva. "We're going all in," she said. "Emotional distress, retaliation, intimidation. We're not just fighting for me anymore. File the expanded lawsuit." The case had officially shifted. No longer a single act of violence, now a battle against the entire machine protecting Heather Whitmore and punishing those who dared speak. Later that week, Naomi met with Michelle Sanders again, this time in the cafeteria of Heritage Regional, while her mother rested upstairs. Michelle slipped into the chair across from her, eyes scanning the room nervously. "I'm risking everything talking to you," she said. Naomi nodded. "I appreciate it. Truly. I flew with Heather for 4 years. Michelle began. She had a system, code words, nicknames. She'd say things like Section 8 and 5C or affirmative action and first-class signals to other crew about who she thought didn't deserve to be there. Naomi felt her stomach turn. She treated passengers differently. Absolutely. Slower service, rudeness, ignoring them. If anyone complained, management said they were overreacting. "Why are you coming forward now?" Naomi asked. Michelle's jaw clenched. "My sister's married to a black man. Their son, my nephew, is 10. They flew Liberty last month. Heather was on that flight. She ignored my nephew for over an hour while serving everyone else. My sister complained." Heather said, "There must be a misunderstanding." Michelle pushed a flash drive across the table. "It's all here. Crew schedules, complaint records, emails from corporate about avoiding liability when handling race issues. But the most damning file was a spreadsheet, an internal tracking document ranking customer complaints based on race and PR risk. Complaints from white passengers were flagged as high priority. Complaints from Black, Latino, and Middle Eastern passengers low priority. Naomi didn't know whether to cry or scream. With Michelle's permission, Andre Silva filed amended complaints with all relevant federal agencies, and the impact was immediate. Suddenly, more voices emerged. 3 former employees came forward. The slow, stalling investigation accelerated. Heather Whitmore was placed on administrative leave, the first public sign that Liberty Air recognized wrongdoing. Then, Jonathan Reed issued a sterile statement. Liberty Air is committed to inclusivity and is reviewing all internal procedures to ensure fairness. For the first time since the slap, Naomi felt a flicker of vindication. Her mother stabilized enough to move to rehab. Elijah landed 2 promising interviews. The twins, in their latest scan, were healthy and active. The tide, perhaps, was shifting. Until the call came. Michelle was on the line, her voice trembling. "They know," she said. "Someone saw us meeting. I've been fired." Naomi felt her blood run cold. "They said I violated company confidentiality. And it's worse. They're threatening to press charges, corporate espionage. My apartment was broken into last night. Nothing stolen, except my laptop and backup drives." The message couldn't be clearer. Help Naomi Carter, and you'll be destroyed. That night, one witness backed out. Then another stopped answering calls. "They're isolating us," Andre said grimly. Textbook intimidation. Naomi made a decision, one Elijah initially resisted. "Michelle's staying with us," she said. "That puts us in more danger," Elijah warned. "We're already targets," Naomi replied. "And if we let fear divide us, they win." Michelle moved into their guest room the next day. She barely slept, jumped at noises, double-checked every lock. But she stayed, because she knew the truth mattered, because Naomi refused to fight this alone. We don't defeat systemic discrimination by turning our backs on each other. "Doctor," Naomi Carter said quietly. That was the moment Michelle Sanders moved into the guest room of Naomi and Elijah Brooks's modest suburban home. She barely slept her first night. Every sound made her flinch. She double-checked locks, kept curtains drawn, and whispered on the phone like someone in hiding because her fear wasn't paranoia. At 3:04 the motion alert on their security camera pinged. A shadowy figure stood across the street, snapping photos of their home. The next day, Global News Network aired an investigative feature on racial discrimination within the airline industry. Naomi's case took center stage. The reporter had independently corroborated several of Michelle's claims. Other passengers came forward. Some had never filed complaints, believing it would be pointless. Now, their stories formed a chilling pattern. Not just Heather Whitmore, not just on one flight. It was the entire service network of Liberty Air. By the end of the week, the company's stock price dropped 3%. Activist investors, once comfortably quiet, began demanding answers during Liberty's quarterly earnings call. For the first time, Jonathan Reed, the airline's COO, sounded cornered. Then the pushback began. Liberty Air's PR team released a statement dismissing the wave of stories as a coordinated media campaign motivated by personal and political agendas. They praised Heather's 15 years of exemplary service, suggesting she was the latest victim of cancel culture. And then came the counterattack. A civil lawsuit filed against Naomi Carter, Andre Silva, and Michelle Sanders. Allegations: defamation, interference with business contracts, conspiracy, damages sought $20 million. They're trying to bankrupt us into silence, Andre said grimly as they reviewed the summons. Even if we win, we could lose everything just fighting this. Elias stared at the stack of legal documents. Can they even do this? It's a slap suit, Andre explained. Strategic lawsuit against public participation. It's not about justice. It's about bleeding us dry. They want to crush your spirit and drain your bank account. That night, as Naomi lay in bed, one of the twins kicked hard. She rested her hand on her belly, whispering, "I will not let this be your world." The next morning, their living room looked more like a war room. Andre's law office had transformed into a campaign headquarters. Timelines, legal memos, deposition transcripts, and evidence binders covered every surface. Naomi, now 8 months pregnant and under strict medical watch, attended via video from her bed. "I want you to hear this," she told Andre, pointing to a section of testimony from Liberty Air's compliance officer. When asked about discrimination procedures, Naomi read, Jonathan Reed said, "Every complaint is evaluated equally, regardless of background." She tapped the screen. But Michelle's spreadsheet shows they classified complaints by race and social risk. "Perjury," Andre muttered, "and not the first time." 3 devastating findings had emerged from the investigation. 1. Heather Whitmore had 7 prior complaints from minority passengers, all dismissed as misunderstandings. Liberty Air operated a covert risk-scoring system rating complaints by how much damage a person could do to their image, not the merit of the complaint. 3. Compensation for similar incidents varied wildly based on race. White passengers received thousands more, often without needing to push. "It's not about one bad actor," Michelle said during a call. "It's the whole system. Douglas Barrett and Jonathan Reed have been covering this up for years." Emails confirmed that Douglas, Liberty's customer service director, had routinely referred to racial complaints as playing the card. He encouraged quiet resolution code for silencing people. The deeper they dug, the uglier it got. And Liberty fought back harder. Naomi's hospital privileges were abruptly reviewed after an anonymous complaint questioning her professionalism. Elijah's promising job lead suddenly went cold. Recruiters stopped returning calls. Their health insurance provider launched a verification process that delayed coverage just as Naomi approached her due date. "They're trying to break us from every angle," Elijah said as he sorted through letters, notices, and emails. "They're making it impossible to live a normal life." Thankfully, Andre had secured support from the Green and Matthews civil rights law firm. It gave them more legal muscle, but the emotional cost kept climbing. Naomi's blood pressure crept into dangerous territory. Her obstetrician placed her on modified bed rest. No work, no stress, no strain, none of which were possible anymore. "The evidence is overwhelming," Naomi said to Andre and Alyssa Green, a senior attorney now assisting. "How are they still denying it?" Alyssa didn't flinch, because companies like Liberty don't have to win. They just have to survive until you run out of breath. They wait you out. Naomi refused to let that happen. Even while confined to bed, she participated in strategy calls, reviewed exhibits, and rehearsed testimony. But the next violation hit differently. A package arrived at their front door. No return address. Inside was a black and white printout of Naomi's most recent ultrasound. A red X had been drawn over the twins' image. Elijah called the police immediately. The detective was sympathetic but firm. "It's disturbing, but unless there's a direct threat, there's not much we can do." That night, Elijah installed motion-activated floodlights, extra security cameras, and a monitored alarm system. He began sleeping in shifts with Michelle to ensure someone was always awake. Naomi, lying in bed with a fetal heart monitor strapped to her belly, felt more exposed than ever. "They accessed our medical files," she whispered. "What kind of people are we dealing with later that night?" Elijah sat on the edge of the bed. "Naomi, maybe we should consider the settlement. Just think of the twins. Think of your mom. How long can we do this?" Naomi blinked back tears. "I've thought about it. Every day." She paused, then said, "But if we settle, we teach our daughters that silence is the safest option, that injustice is too big to fight, that nothing changes." And Naomi knew the case was no longer just about her. The Federal Aviation Board had expanded its inquiry. Now, it wasn't just about her slap. It was about Liberty's entire complaint resolution system. A class action lawsuit loomed. Then, 3 days before Naomi's scheduled hearing, it happened. Severe abdominal pain gripped her. Elijah rushed her to Camden Women's Medical Center, where doctors diagnosed preeclampsia, a life-threatening condition characterized by high blood pressure and protein in the urine. "You need complete bed rest, Dr. Kim warned. Any more stress could trigger seizures, or worse. Andre visited that afternoon. The hearing's Thursday. "Should I ask for a postponement?" Naomi exhaled slowly. "They'll claim I'm faking it, or stalling. Postponing could delay the process by a month or more." Andre warned, "Maybe longer." Naomi closed her eyes and imagined Heather Whitmore, still on paid leave. Michelle, unemployed and facing false criminal charges. Her unborn twins, already battling the consequences of her fight. "I'll be there," Naomi said quietly, "even if I have to testify from a hospital bed." "Dr." Naomi Carter stared at the ceiling tiles of Camden Women's Medical Center, her pulse rising with each beep of the fetal monitor beside her. Every rhythmic blip echoed the weight of her decision. She would testify. The doctor had made it clear any stress could risk her life and the lives of her unborn twins. But Naomi had weighed the risks. She couldn't let this moment pass. "I'll be at the hearing," she said, her voice clear despite the tremor in her chest. "This might be our only chance to be heard." "But your health," Elijah Brooks began. "Is at risk either way," she interrupted gently. "The stress of doing nothing is just as dangerous as speaking the truth." Andre Silva nodded, his eyes grim. I'll arrange medical transport. We'll have a nurse with you at all times. That night, as the hospital lights dimmed and the machines hummed softly, Naomi penned a letter to her unborn daughters. She wrote of strength, of truth, of why their mother had chosen to stand in a storm rather than wait for it to pass. Whatever happens at the hearing, she wrote, I want you to know your mother fought for the world you deserve. Sleep didn't come easily, but when it did, she dreamed not of pain or fear, but of courtrooms filled with justice and planes where every passenger was treated with dignity. The hearing room of the Federal Aviation Board buzzed with tension. When Naomi was wheeled in, camera shutters erupted in rapid-fire bursts. A heavily pregnant black woman in a wheelchair, medical monitors discreetly attached beneath her tailored blazer, facing down an army of suits. It was an image the press would not forget. On one side sat Naomi, Elijah, Andre Silva, and their legal team. On the other, a wall of Liberty Air's top brass, Jonathan Reed, Douglas Barrett, attorneys from Hawthorne and Reed LLP, and PR strategists glued to their tablets. At the end of the row sat Heather Whitmore, clad in a demure navy dress, carefully styled to evoke vulnerability. The aggressor now played the victim. Presiding over the committee was Chairman Malcolm Graves, whose ties to Liberty's advisory board were well known, but not enough to bar his role. Andre had objected. It had been overruled. This hearing will come to order, Graves said curtly. We are investigating complaint DO-7222 regarding alleged discriminatory practices at Liberty Air. I remind all parties this is a fact-finding session, not a trial. The emphasis on alleged was not subtle. Andre exchanged a knowing glance with Naomi. They were walking into a fixed game. Liberty's representatives presented first. Heather's voice trembled expertly as she recounted feeling threatened by Naomi's tone and intimidated by her insistence. I reacted instinctively to protect myself, she said, blinking back practiced tears. In 15 years, I've never had issues with passengers of any race. Naomi's blood pressure monitor beeped quietly. The nurse beside her adjusted the flow on the IV drip and whispered something Naomi ignored. Then Douglas Barrett stood to toot Liberty's industry-leading diversity initiatives and swift resolution rates. Charts were displayed selective data meant to disguise systemic bias. The committee nodded along. When Andre attempted to present Michelle Sanders' spreadsheets, the same files that had uncovered the racial complaint categorization system, Chairman Graves raised a hand. This information appears to have been obtained without proper authorization. It cannot be considered. These documents show clear evidence of systemic discrimination, Andre countered. Under whistleblower protection, the committee has ruled them inadmissible. Graves interrupted coldly. Move on. One by one. The evidence Naomi's team had worked months to compile was dismissed on technicalities. Eyewitness statements were permitted only in written form. So statistical analyses were dismissed as speculative. During a break, Naomi was wheeled into a side room with Andre. Her nurse was checking vitals. Your blood pressure is spiking, the nurse warned. You need to return to the hospital. Not yet, Naomi said. She wasn't done. Back in the main chamber, Graves called her name. The committee calls Dr. Naomi Carter to testify. Naomi was wheeled to the front, adjusting her posture despite the discomfort. Dr. Carter, Graves began, we understand your condition, so please keep your remarks concise. Describe the incident that led to this complaint. Naomi inhaled slowly, then began, but not with the slap. This isn't about one flight, she said calmly. It's not even about one flight attendant. This is about a culture, A corporate system that protects discrimination and punishes those who challenge it," Graves interjected. "Please restrict your remarks to the flight in question," Naomi continued. Unfazed, "When I requested a pillow as a pregnant passenger, I was struck in the face. But that wasn't the most dangerous part of this story." She paused. "What came after attempts to silence me, destroy my career, bankrupt my family, that's where the real danger lies." She detailed the retaliation her hospital privileges questioned. Her husband's job lost, her medical records weaponized, her family harassed. Graves tried again. "Dr. Carter, please. When discrimination extends beyond a single act and becomes institutional," Naomi said firmly, "then it must be confronted institutionally. And when victims are threatened into silence, then justice itself is under attack." The room was still. Even the most hardened PR consultants glanced up from their tablets. Then, chaos. The doors at the back of the room swung open. Danielle Morris, Naomi's original contact at the Department of Transportation, walked in flanked by 2 federal agents. Graves froze mid-sentence. Andre stood quickly. "Mr. Chairman, we request an immediate recess." It was granted, reluctantly. In a small chamber behind the hearing room, Naomi sat quietly while Danielle confessed. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice trembling. "They got to me. Jonathan Reed offered me a position triple my government salary. I thought I could help from inside. But when I hesitated to falsify records, they threatened my brother's career." She looked at Naomi with wet eyes. "Then I saw what they did to you. The harassment, the ultrasound photo. I knew I couldn't be part of it." She handed Andre a folder. Inside were printed emails, meeting memos and chat logs, proof of coordination between Liberty executives and Chairman Graves to block Naomi's evidence, proof of suppressed witness lists, proof of data manipulation. Andre flipped through the pages. His voice was low, but sharp. "This is obstruction, interference with a federal investigation." When the hearing resumed, the tone had shifted. The federal agents remained in the room. Jonathan Reed's composure cracked slightly. Douglas Barrett fidgeted. Heather looked ashen. Naomi sat calmly, her hand resting on her belly. Her truth had been spoken. Her proof had arrived. For the first time, it felt like the system might finally listen. "Doctor," Naomi Carter stared blankly at the wall of her hospital room at Camden Women's Medical Center. Olivia and Maya's monitors softly beeping in the background. The news from Stephanie Kumar played over and over in her mind, like a cruel joke she couldn't wake up from. Chairman Malcolm Graves, pressured behind closed doors by Jonathan Reed and the corporate forces of Liberty Air, had rewritten the committee's findings. Everything, every sleepless night, every sacrifice, every bruise to her spirit was now officially labeled an isolated misunderstanding. "This can't be happening," Naomi whispered. "They're rewriting the truth." Andre Silva arrived minutes later, his expression telling her he already knew. "We've been boxed in," he said, pulling a chair to her bedside. "They're moving pieces faster than we can respond." "Then we need to flip the board," Naomi replied, voice steely. "Expose everything, on our terms." Together with Elijah Brooks, who'd been juggling NICU visits with the family's deteriorating finances, they began drafting their next move. Naomi's video statement had ignited public interest before the time had come to reignite that fire. This time, they would include the documentation Tara Johnston had risked her career to provide, along with data visualizations of Liberty Air's discriminatory complaint scoring system. But the retaliation only escalated. Tara's apartment was broken into again. This time, her personal laptop and even her pet's medical records were taken. Intimidation with a chillingly personal touch. A week later, as Naomi recovered enough strength to leave the NICU for longer stretches, Camden Women's Medical Center quietly informed her that a third-party insurance audit had flagged her NICU privileges for potential ethical review. The implication was clear: Liberty Air had extended its reach. The final blow came when Andre received a cease-and-desist letter from Hawthorne & Reed LLP, warning that Naomi's upcoming interview with a national news outlet could be construed as defamatory interference with an ongoing federal process. It was a legal muzzle, but Naomi wasn't interested in playing defense anymore. From her hospital bed, Naomi gave the interview anyway live. "My name is Dr. Naomi Carter," she said, her voice calm and unwavering as cameras rolled. "I'm a board-certified neurosurgeon. I'm a mother to 2 premature daughters, and I was slapped in the face by a Liberty Air employee for asking for a pillow. That assault was real, and the retaliation I've endured since has been even more violent in spirit, in cost, in consequence. Footage of Heather Whitmore's smirk, committee members blocking evidence, and the doctored surveillance video played behind her. Then came the unreleased files, Tara's spreadsheets, Andre's legal filings, internal Liberty Air emails with Jonathan Reed's signature. The interview trended globally within hours. More whistleblowers reached out: former Liberty Air supervisors, pilots, and even a contractor from the FAB who claimed to have witnessed Chairman Graves coordinating with Jonathan Reed to suppress certain categories of complaints. Then, a major break. The Justice Department's Civil Rights Division released a statement confirming that a federal investigation into Liberty Air's internal practices was underway and had been obstructed by possible interference from external political and corporate interests. Chairman Malcolm Graves was quietly removed from his post 2 days later. That same week, Douglas Barrett, the airline's senior customer service director, was subpoenaed to testify under oath. He resigned abruptly, citing personal reasons, but not before leaked emails tied him directly to the falsified passenger satisfaction metrics. Back in the NICU, Naomi was holding both of her daughters when Elijah entered the room, tears shining in his eyes. "We're not alone anymore," he said softly. "They're crumbling. Naomi." She looked down at Olivia's sleeping face, then at Maya's gentle breath. The price they had paid: public attacks, financial ruin, threats to their safety could never be fully repaid. But this was a victory, a real one. "I didn't want them to inherit this fight," Naomi whispered, "but I want them to know their mother didn't run from it." Later that night, Naomi opened her inbox to find dozens of messages from strangers: Black mothers, flight attendants, corporate employees, lawyers, and young girls inspired by her stand. One reads simply, "You gave us all permission to speak. Thank you." The fight wasn't over, but the tide had finally turned. The NICU was quiet that night. The only sounds the soft whirring of machines and the occasional beep from Olivia's heart monitor. Dr. Naomi Carter sat in her wheelchair beside the incubators, her body heavy with exhaustion, her mind spinning with impossible decisions. In her lap, tiny Maya slept peacefully, oblivious to the war unfolding around her. The leaked documents had given them everything and taken everything, too. Judge Lennox, the federal magistrate who issued the gag order, had a long history of ruling in favor of corporate defendants. Andre Silva's team had expected resistance, but this level of procedural maneuvering bordered on orchestrated sabotage. "They're not defending themselves," Andre had said that morning. "They're erasing the battlefield." Naomi stared at the blank wall of her hospital room later that night, wondering how much more she could sacrifice. Her medical license was under review, her surgical privileges suspended, her finances drained. Every time she tried to stand, they hit her with another blow. The image of her daughters alive, breathing, beautiful, anchored her resolve. Elijah Brooks, seated at the window with his laptop open, was trying to apply for one last job lead. She could hear him quietly retyping his resume, deleting details, recalibrating the truth just to keep hope alive. "Elijah," she said gently, "what if we took the deal?" He turned to her, his face unreadable. "You mean their NDA? The hush money I mean stopping. Before this takes one more thing from us." Elijah crossed the room, kneeling in front of her. "Naomi, I'll follow your lead no matter what. You want peace. We'll make peace. But if you still want to fight, I'll find a way to stand beside you, even if we're crawling." Naomi looked away, the war inside her louder than anything the court could conjure. Then her phone buzzed. A news alert. Whistleblower. Inside Liberty Air exposes pattern of racial discrimination. Full report at 11. Somehow, someone had leaked a redacted version of the internal files. The timestamp traced back to an independent journalist in Toronto, where the gag orders held no jurisdiction. The report didn't mention names or direct quotes, but the system was cracking open again. Andre called seconds later. "I didn't send it," he said, "but someone did. It wasn't enough to reverse the legal tide, but it changed the public conversation overnight. Major media outlets picked up the story. Jonathan Reed, Heather Whitmore, and Douglas Barrett were all named as subjects of a pattern of willful discriminatory conduct. A former Liberty Air pilot came forward, anonymously, and confirmed that crew placement was often done by passenger demographic preference. The floodgates reopened. The Federal Aviation Board reopened its internal review under a new interim chair. Chairman Malcolm Graves was officially placed under investigation for procedural misconduct. And perhaps most importantly, the Justice Department issued a statement requesting Liberty Air preserve all internal communications an unmistakable signal of a criminal inquiry. Still, the legal threat loomed large. The gag order remained in place. The civil suits filed by Liberty Air against Naomi, Andre, and Tara Johnston advanced toward discovery. Tara, now living under an alias in another state, faced the terrifying possibility of being subpoenaed in multiple jurisdictions. It was Tara who sent Naomi a voice message late one night. "I know we're all tired. I know it feels like they'll win. But if we stop now, all we've shown them is that they just have to push hard enough. I think about my nephew every day. I want him to grow up knowing someone fought back." Naomi played the message again and again, as Maya stirred gently in her arms. The next morning, she made her decision. She held a press conference on the hospital's front lawn, flanked by Elijah and Andre. Dozens of cameras surrounded her wheelchair as she delivered the shortest statement of her life. "I've been ordered not to speak about documents showing that a major airline systemically discriminated against people who look like me. I've been warned that my life, my family, my reputation, and my career will be destroyed if I don't stay quiet. But I'm still speaking, because my daughters will not grow up believing that silence is survival." The cameras erupted. That night, a national civil rights coalition announced they were filing an amicus brief in Naomi's favor. Major news outlets aired unedited versions of her original testimony. Public opinion shifted dramatically and quietly. Liberty Air's board of directors placed Jonathan Reed on administrative leave pending internal review. For the first time in weeks, Naomi's inbox was filled not with legal threats, but messages of support from mothers, doctors, airline workers, and even former passengers who had their own stories to tell. Somehow, in the depths of exhaustion, they had pierced the armor. Andre sent her one last text before sunrise. "The storm hasn't passed, but we're not drowning anymore. We're sailing into it." Naomi looked at her daughters and whispered, "We're not done. But we're not broken. Doctor—" Naomi Carter sat upright in her hospital bed. Maya nestled in her arms. As Elijah read the news aloud, Liberty Air's stock dropped 11% following reports of an ongoing SEC investigation. Board members have scheduled an emergency executive session to discuss potential leadership changes. Her daughters slept peacefully through the announcement that marked the crumbling of a giant. Bernard Watkins had done more than deliver warnings. The institutional pressure he applied was calibrated, relentless, and far beyond the scope of any court ruling. His threat wasn't just legal, it was financial, existential. If Liberty Air didn't clean house, shareholders would. That afternoon, news broke that Jonathan Reed had been placed on indefinite administrative leave. Douglas Barrett resigned quietly hours later, citing health reasons. Neither man gave interviews. But the most telling signal came not from them, but from Heather Whitmore. In a pre-recorded segment aired on a major news network, she admitted the incident had not been handled with appropriate empathy or fairness. Though she stopped short of confessing to the assault, her tone was softer, her gaze uncertain. It was the closest thing to accountability Naomi had seen yet. Andre called that evening with cautious optimism. The DOJ's Civil Rights Division under Jeffrey Barnes has reclassified the investigation as a priority discrimination and retaliation case. That opens the door to federal subpoenas. The gag order may not last much longer. Naomi exhaled slowly, carefully, as if her breath could protect the fragile peace blooming inside her. "Do we push forward?" she asked. Andre paused. "You've already forced the truth to the surface. Naomi, whatever comes next, they can't put this back in the dark." And yet, the most powerful move had not come through courts or rallies. It came through whispered conversations, boardroom leverage, and ethical fissures within the very system that had once silenced her. 3 days later, Naomi was discharged from Camden Women's Medical Center, returning home for the first time since her daughter's birth. Waiting on the doorstep was a sealed envelope with no return address. Inside, a typed letter, Dr. Carter. What began as a routine shareholder review has revealed something far more insidious. Corporate culture is not only defined by profit, but by what it tolerates. As of today, Eastland Financial Group has officially withdrawn its investment from Liberty Air. A new era of corporate accountability begins with difficult choices. Thank you for helping us make one. B. W. Below it, a press release announcing Eastland's divestment, followed hours later by 2 additional firms doing the same. Within a week, Liberty Air's board announced a comprehensive review of internal policies, the suspension of all executives under investigation, and the formation of an external oversight committee including 3 former civil rights attorneys and 2 patient advocacy representatives. The airline had not changed its soul, but it had been cracked open. Elijah poured tea in their dimly lit kitchen as Naomi cradled both twins on her chest. The chaos of the past weeks was still very much alive, but quiet now, like a retreating storm. "You never signed the settlement," he said softly. "I didn't have to," Naomi replied. "The system tried to erase me, but I found another system, one they didn't control." Elijah nodded slowly. "So what?" Now Naomi kissed Olivia's soft forehead. "Now we rest. Then we rebuild." At a university auditorium filled with aspiring doctors, Dr. Naomi Carter stood at the podium, the honorary guest of the Diversity in Medicine Foundation. Her name had become more than a headline. It had become a symbol. "I didn't win because I shouted the loudest," she told the crowd. "I won because I endured, because others, some silent, some brave, stepped forward when I couldn't." We often talk about justice as something delivered by verdicts or protests, But real justice is built one crack at a time until the whole structure shifts. She paused, her gaze finding a familiar face in the audience, Tara Johnston, now working at a nonprofit for whistleblower protection. Andre and Elijah sat beside her, Maya and Olivia crawling across their laps. Naomi smiled. This isn't a story of a woman versus a company. She finished. It's a story of people refusing to be erased. Doctor? Naomi Carter smiled softly as the lights brightened and the camera rolled. Sitting tall, the pain, fear, and uncertainty of the past year no longer defined her expression. Instead, it was resolve and a quiet triumph that filled her eyes. Did I ever imagine it? She repeated the interviewer's question. No, I didn't imagine anything beyond surviving that flight. But injustice has a way of revealing the system beneath the surface, and once I saw it, I couldn't unsee it. Her voice was calm, but her words struck with precision. What began with Heather Whitmore's slap had spiraled into a historic reckoning. And now, as the interview unfolded across homes and screens nationwide, Naomi's story was no longer just a story. It was a movement. The interviewer continued, "You now lead the Williams Foundation, which has already supported over 120 victims of transportation-related discrimination. What drives you to keep pushing forward?" Naomi didn't hesitate. "My daughters," she said, turning briefly to glance at the monitor displaying a live feed of Maya and Olivia in the green room with Elijah. "I want them to grow up in a world where dignity isn't negotiated, where silence isn't the price of peace." Behind the scenes, Andre Silva watched from a monitor station, proud and exhausted. He had been there since the beginning, when the case was seen as an impossible uphill battle. He'd seen the gag orders, the betrayals, the surveillance. He'd seen Naomi lose everything, then build something stronger from the ashes. Now, sitting beside him was Tara Johnston, who had not only been reinstated, but promoted. As Liberty Air's Director of Equity Training, she now oversaw a team developing immersive programs based on real-life cases, including her own. Their training module, dubbed Flight 1482, had been adopted by 4 other carriers. It became required onboarding for new flight crews and a refresher for senior staff. Unlike sterile corporate videos, it used real testimony, unfiltered perspectives, and data from the internal system Naomi had helped expose. "What's been the biggest change for you personally?" the interviewer asked. Naomi leaned forward slightly. "Understanding how justice really works. I used to think justice came from the law. Then I learned it comes from people willing to speak up, even when the cost is high." The interview shifted to footage from Naomi's congressional testimony. Her calm delivery had been dissected by political analysts, praised for its clarity and strength. It hadn't been a performance, it had been truth. She had spoken of Liberty Air's internal risk matrix, of altered complaints, of how corporate systems were weaponized to silence dissent. Her testimony had directly influenced the drafting of the Transportation Equity and Accountability Act, which now protected whistleblowers like Tara, imposed severe penalties for retaliation, and required full transparency in complaint handling for transportation companies. The host's final question was quiet. "Dr. Carter, you've become a symbol for change, but you've also endured a great deal. If you could go back to that day on the plane and choose again, would you still ask for that pillow?" Naomi paused, smiling. Not the kind of smile that glosses over pain, but the kind forged from surviving it. "I would," she answered, "because that pillow wasn't just about comfort. It was about being seen, heard, valued. And I believe everyone, regardless of who they are or where they sit, deserves that." The screen faded to a final graphic, the Williams Protocol. Now adopted by 7 major carriers, over 3 million passengers served under its protections. One voice, lasting change. 6 months later, Naomi Carter returned to surgery full-time at Massachusetts General Hospital. Her work focused on maternal neurohealth, continuing her research into how stress and discrimination affected pregnancy outcomes in women of color. Elijah Brooks, now part of a nonprofit consulting firm, helped companies audit internal equity structures before they became national scandals. His previous silence during Jasmine's darkest hours had been replaced by fierce advocacy. He was now the voice in the room, saying what others were too afraid to. Andre Silva took on a new caseload, focusing solely on corporate discrimination cases. His win with Naomi had opened doors for victims who had once felt hopeless. And Tara Johnston began mentoring young professionals of color within the airline industry, ensuring that no new crew member entered the skies unprepared for the realities or the responsibilities of their role. The Williams Foundation grew rapidly, thanks to industry donations, public support, and a surprising ally, Janet Foster, the new CEO of Liberty Air. Janet, while born from necessity, had become a genuine believer. Under her leadership, Liberty Air transformed its image not through marketing, but through measurable change. In the Carter household, the twins were walking now. Their first words, spoken with giggles and mispronunciations, echoed through the same home where the darkest days had once settled. And every time Naomi passed the framed copy of the Transportation Equity and Accountability Act, signed by both political parties, bearing her name and its subtitle, she remembered the pillow. What she asked for was simple. What she received was unthinkable. What she built from it, unforgettable. The interview deepened, exploring the implications far beyond Dr. Naomi Carter's personal ordeal. It peeled back the layers of institutional resistance, how corporations exploited legal complexity and financial superiority to exhaust those who dared to confront discrimination, and how oversight mechanisms meant to ensure justice could themselves be bent by influence, pressure, and money. Yet amid all that, Naomi noted, power doesn't exist in a vacuum. When the interviewer asked about the Williams Protocol, now spreading across multiple industries, Naomi responded with conviction. The most important component is independent oversight. You can't expect an organization to police itself when its survival depends on suppressing bad press. True accountability begins when someone outside the structure, unaffected by its power, reviews what happens inside. The camera lingered as Naomi spoke, her tone steady but direct. She wasn't just recounting events. She was offering a blueprint. In the final moments of the segment, the host leaned in. For our viewers facing discrimination, but lacking your credentials or legal support, what would you say to them? Naomi didn't answer right away. Her mind reached back to every dark hour, the slap, the denials, the lawsuits, the smear campaigns, the NICU monitors beeping beside her twin daughters. First, she began. Document everything. Record what happens, when, and who was there. Second, know the resistance will escalate. That's not a sign to stop. It's a sign that what you're doing matters. Third, she looked directly into the camera. Don't fight alone. Find your community. Justice isn't an individual triumph. It's the result of collective effort of people who might never meet you, but still believe you matter. She smiled then, the kind that comes only after fire. My case didn't succeed because I was stronger than Liberty Air. It succeeded because enough people across industries and positions realized that injustice eventually costs everyone. When the lights dimmed, Naomi made her way back to the green room. Elijah was waiting with the twins, who were now curious, expressive infants. A young girl, maybe 6, sat on the floor near the playpen. She looked up with wide eyes. "Are you the lady from the airplane?" she asked. "I am," Naomi replied. Kneeling beside her, the girl's voice was full of awe. "My mommy says you made it, so people have to be nice to everyone on planes now, even if they look different." "I hope so," Naomi said with a smile. "That's what we worked for. I want to be a doctor and a plane fixer like you," the girl declared proudly. Naomi glanced at Elijah, both recognizing the deeper resonance of that moment. This wasn't about compensation or headlines. This was the next generation already believing the world had shifted because someone refused to sit down when told to. That evening, they boarded a return flight home. As doctor, Naomi Carter settled into first class with the twins nestled safely in their carriers. The new flight attendant approached. She was young, black, her posture poised, and her voice warm. "Dr. Carter, welcome aboard. May I get you anything? Perhaps a pillow for added support with the little ones." It was such a simple thing. Not a favor, not an apology. Respect. Without hesitation, without resistance. Equal service for an equal passenger. "Yes, thank you," Naomi said. "That would be perfect." The flight took off, not just into the air, but into a new paradigm shaped by one woman's refusal to shrink under pressure. Dr. Naomi Carter didn't set out to change the world. She boarded that plane simply wanting to get to Boston, deliver her research, and return home to prepare for motherhood. But what she received, disrespect, violence, and corporate retaliation, forced her to stand in a fight she never asked for, but refused to walk away from. Through months of public scrutiny, legal battles, and personal heartbreak, Naomi never lost sight of her core belief that everyone deserves to be treated with dignity, regardless of their race, gender, or status. Even when her career crumbled, even when her hospital credentials were suspended, even when her newborn daughters fought for breath in the NICU, she stood tall. Why? Because injustice doesn't just wound the person it targets. It echoes through families, institutions, and generations. And yet, this story doesn't end in defeat. Thanks to Naomi's resilience, Liberty Air faced a reckoning. Executives were removed, policies were rewritten, and the Williams Protocol, a sweeping reform blueprint named in her honor, is now setting a new standard for corporate accountability. But even more powerful than policy was the moment a little girl looked up at Naomi and said, "I want to be a doctor and airplane fixer like you." That's legacy. Naomi's story reminds us that real change rarely comes easily. It comes when someone refuses to stay silent. When a voice rises in the silence and others join in. So ask yourself, what would I have done if I'd been on that plane? And more importantly, what will I do the next time I see injustice take flight? Because change doesn't begin in courtrooms or headlines. It begins with a choice. If this story moved you, if it made you think, feel, or question, please like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, and subscribe to our channel for more powerful true stories about courage, injustice, and the human spirit. Let's build a world where no one has to fight alone, and where every story like Naomi's becomes a spark for something bigger. Thank you for watching.